Hi, everybody. So, over the past few weeks of this course, I read a book by Joel Salatin called Everything I Do is Illegal: War Stories from the Local Food Front. In this book, Salatin describes why we as Americans do not have the freedom to choose the food we purchase and eat. He does this using a great deal of humor, which makes this book hilariously entertaining. He talks about everything from child labor laws to food inspection. Bureaucrats provide themselves sole discretion over what food is available in the local marketplace. He talks about the struggles he has faced in overcoming these obstacles during his farming career. He tells stories of his personal experiences, which does a very good job getting the information across to the reader in a way that is easy to understand and can be retained. The main topic of this book is how involved the government really is in the farming industry. Salatin believes that we need to go back to our roots and keep the farming industry less regulated, but at the same time, he also believes that there really is no chance of that ever happening again. The book is separated into three sections, which all tell stories about his farming career that push a different topic. The three topics that I learned the most about are the regulation of meat and dairy products, child labor laws, and building regulations. And these are the three topics that I'm going to further discuss. Early on in this book, Salatin tells a story about how early on in his farming career he planned to purchase 10 dairy cows. He figured that he could milk the 10 cows and then sell the milk on his own and make roughly $30,000 a year off the milk. He was pretty wrong about this. According to the U.S. Pasteurized Milk Ordinance, each state may adopt their own laws on the sale of raw milk. However, at the federal level, the USDA bans the interstate sale of raw milk. All milk that is sold across a state line must be pasteurized to meet the standards of the USDA. Salatin's farm is located in Virginia, which is one of the states that adopted the laws saying that milk must be pasteurized if it's going to be sold. I found it to be very interesting that a law like this can vary from state to state. But then again, when the milk is sold across the state line, it becomes federally regulated. So I guess it kind of takes care of that problem. An interesting fact that I found while doing research for this project is that even though in some states you can produce and sell raw milk, 99% of all milk that is sold and consumed in this country has been pasteurized, which I think is probably for the best because the pasteurization process eliminates the bacteria and all the harmful things that are in raw dairy products. So I think the pasteurization process really has the health of the general public in mind, and I think that's probably something that should be utilized if it's there. In the same section of the book that is talking about the regulation of food, Salton tells another story about how he wants to buy pigs in order to produce his own bacon. He figured that he could personally slaughter the pigs and salt and cure the meat all on his own, and then in turn would be able to sell the bacon by the pound and would be able to make a pretty sizable profit off that. However, he quickly found out that if you plan to sell the meat, it is illegal to cure it on your own. The main reason for this is that pigs can carry a multitude of diseases. So pigs that are going to be slaughtered and have their meat sold are thoroughly inspected to ensure that they are disease-free. The pigs must meet USDA standards while they are alive. The pig itself must be disease-free, and the conditions that the animal is living in must also meet USDA standards. Once the animal has been slaughtered, it is then tested again to make sure that no harmful bacteria has grown on it during the production. Once it passes these examinations, it can then be packaged and placed on the shelf to be purchased. Um, After all that would be said and done, Salatin figured that would be just way too expensive for him to do this on his own. If he would have been able to do it on his own, he could have sold it for I think it was $4.50 per pound. But after having to have all these examinations done and all that, he would have been selling it for roughly $9 a pound. It would have doubled the cost of his bacon, and obviously nobody's going to pay $9 a pound for bacon, so he would have lost money on this. Personally, I was not surprised at how regulated this part of the farming industry was. When you're dealing with the health of the general public, you need to take every precaution necessary in order to guarantee that there are no mass outbreaks of disease due to bacteria that can come from food. In the old days, when they did not have the technology that we do today, it was a frequent occurrence that people would die from eating bad food that was contaminated by bacteria. So I tend to agree that this part of the farming industry should be fairly heavily regulated. In the next section of the book, he discusses child labor laws. I found this section to be very interesting because I related to this section the most. When I was growing up, I lived on a Christmas tree farm and helped out quite a bit around the farm. Little did I know we could have gotten in some good trouble for the amount of work that I was doing around the farm. Southton talks about how his son Daniel, as a young boy, would help him around the farm, much like I did with my family. He recalls a few close calls with the government regarding child labor laws. The United States Department of Labor restricts the hours that youth under 16 years of age can work and lists hazardous occupations too dangerous for young workers to perform. I had always thought that if a child was working for a family owned business, such as a farm, then it was okay for them to work there. But the child labor law does still apply to family businesses. And yes, this is a federal law, so you could get into some trouble for it. I think because Salton's farm is so big and sells food across the country, this is why he ran into problems when it came to this law. I came from a very small farm in southern Illinois that really drew no attention from the government. Um, so I think that's why I my family never really had any problems with it. Child labor is something that the government does not mess around with. If you're found guilty of committing this crime, you can face some serious jail time along with heavy, heavy fines that go along with it. Um, yeah, in the last section, he talks about a time when his son Daniel, who he got in trouble or almost got in trouble with for child labor laws, is now grown up and adult and is wanting to build a house. Daniel plans to cut down trees and use the mill that is located on their farm to produce the lumber necessary to build his own house on part of the farm. The government catches wind of this plan and quickly shuts it down. They say that he is more than welcome to build his own house on the farm if he gets necessary permits, which of course he was going to do because he already knew about that. But they said he would have to buy the lumber from a licensed lumberyard. Apparently, it is illegal to mill your own lumber without a special license. To obtain this license, you have to take a series of classes that teaches you all of the necessary steps and precautions in order to ensure safety, to make sure that you do not spread disease amongst trees. If you go out and just start cutting down trees, you can spread diseases through the air. Bugs carry the diseases as well. Um, so these classes teach you how to prevent the spread of those said diseases. Um, in closing, this assignment taught me a lot about what goes on behind the scenes in the farming industry. Most people, most people think it's just farmers out there harvesting fields and taking care of their animals, but that could not be further from the truth. Yes, they're out there doing these things, but they constantly have the government breathing down their necks to make sure that they are not breaking any laws. A lot of the laws that farmers have to follow seem very unnecessary in a way, while others are extremely important. But no matter how stupid or important these laws may be, they are all in place to keep the people of this country safe, and for that reason, all farmers must abide by them. In conclusion, one should be able to tell how regulated the farming industry truly is. The farming life is obviously not for everybody, but if you choose to become a farmer one day, make sure that you know all the laws and regulations. Make sure you take the steps necessary to learn safety and all that stuff, and to make sure you have a lot of patience because if you start a farm and it becomes big, the government is going to be all over you. Thank you.